All right. My name is Kourtnii, and I cannot use microphones. All right, welcome back. Last day of soil stewardship training. I am really excited to see everybody's faces this morning. I hope you got a good night's sleep. We are going to be using our brains today. We use them every day, but today we are really actually going to be thinking. So just a few housekeeping items. This is going to be the flow this morning. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about law and policy because it is important, and we do need to have a general understanding of how we can engage our policymakers about funding, supporting, and opening doors for this area of work that we are so passionate about. We are the experts about composting, and it's our jobs to educate policymakers who by nature are not composters and farmers. So we're the experts in this field, and this is an opportunity for us. Without further ado, let's get into it. I am going to do my best to make compost law and policy as fun and engaging as possible, and understanding that a lot of people just don't have the base of how to even engage in policy. So we have set this presentation up with cartoons to try to make it a little bit more digestible. So a little bit more about me is I got into this because I started a vermicomposting business in Oakland, and I was fabricating flow-through worm bins and putting them into community gardens. I was also trying to bike around and pick up from restaurants and compost at a yard in Oakland. But I ran into a lot of problems with the law. And I went to the Sustainable Economies Law Center legal aid clinic. It's free. I highly recommend it. They do everything from business development through, even just dealing with a municipality and a city council. And I found out I was not the only one. I was like the fifth person to go to the Sustainable Economies Law Center saying, I woke up and I want to start a community compost business. What do I need to know about the law? Well, it turns out there's actually a lot that you need to know about the law. So we have made some very strategic partnerships as we have built the California Alliance for Community Composting. The first is the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. This organization has created a Composting for Community initiative. They also have created a Community Composters Coalition. Anybody around the world can join the coalition. The only stipulation is that you're actively composting. So after you launch your hubs, you can apply for free help. And some of the resources that they offer is a website called compostlaw.org. We built that together. They also have the Composting for Community map. This is a map of sites all across the United States, so you can find out where people are doing it, but also click on them and find out more about their projects. So if you see that reflecting your vision as well, there's a whole network of folks nationally that we would really encourage you to connect with. We've also created a lot of webinars, and they're only available to people as part of the Community Composters Coalition. So if you want to get on and view what's been happening in the last 7 years and catch up, it's a fantastic group. Then the Sustainable Economies Law Center has also started a compost policy project. This is where we hack out sections of the law that aren't it's not that they're unsupportive, it's just that they're genuinely unclear. People haven't defined what is community gardening, let alone community composting. So it's just a moment to go in and educate your policymakers about a need for clarification, expansions, or new codes. You'll find that most of them are very supportive. So this is a positive process, and I don't want to scare anybody away by saying you walk into a legislator's office. You're actually their constituents, and it's their job to listen to you and to respond to your needs. So take advantage of that, and don't be intimidated. They are real people too. So with the Sustainable Economies Law Center, we have created a curriculum that we call the Soil Policy Party. This is basically an opportunity where you can throw a pizza party, a dinner party. Obviously, my recommendation is you feed people. Look at how well that's working in this situation. And you come together and you ask them to hack out together one section of the law. And you do it once a month for a year. I'm going to go through all the sections of the law that would concern community composting or even launching a drop-off hub. But it's a real good way for having, one, community understanding, and next, community buy-in, and then also community ownership, so that you are a unified voice, you're learning it together, you want to change things with more than just one person. So this is the basis of collective action. So we started researching at our soil policy parties, and we found out that there are many layers of compost law. But not only that everywhere you go, they are different. And they are also changing. And most importantly, they're changing right now, right before our eyes. So while there's a good variation from place to place, what we're finding is that the trend that could become widespread if policymakers and regulating agencies leave out a role for the community composters is that we're going to get a one-size-fits-all model. So the trend is towards creating laws that privilege the large-scale haulers and the large composting facilities. And this is not because policymakers are evil. This is because they genuinely don't know what the other options are. So this is the moment where, again, I said we are the experts. We need to be showing up at these workshops, at these open public comment sessions, at your city council's monthly meetings, and advocating for what you truly want in your own community. So sometimes this trend for big waste is designed to mitigate the harms. So they're coming to it from a public health and safety standpoint. That could potentially cause nuisances, odors, fires, and other concerns. But we know that the harms to public health and safety are actually in the quality of the compost and what we put on our soil. So it's not just how we do it, where and who does it, it is how we are doing it that matters. So this slide I can definitely skip over because you're my choir. But this is what I like to focus on with policymakers, is think about all the opportunity here. These are opportunity for local jobs. These are opportunities for the YIMBYs, I call them, yes in my backyard. So if we are going to put waste management and keep it within urban centers, that we do that in an ecological and an equitable way, that this is not going to communities who are already severely disadvantaged and putting a facility there that is going to further disrupt their lives. Truck traffics alone, we know how it poisons the soil with the diesel fuels and the leads just from the atmosphere. But if you think about your kids playing in the trucks, 500 a day go from the city of Oakland to the Livermore. The diverse methods. So I really want to focus on the fact that if zero waste is to have any integrity at all, we really need to focus on the top part of this triangle. That is preventing the waste from starting in the first place. We've done a really good job with finishing all of the food that we bought, buying the appropriate amount of food that we need. And we did have some leftovers from dinner last night, but we donated it to the church in that same community where the movie was held. So some church group has no idea that they are gonna have a fantastic lunch today. So then, it's feeding people, it's feeding animals. So we know that spent beer grain is really great for goats, they love that. And pigs and chickens. And then there is home composting, and then there is small scale and decentralized composting. If we are doing all of that right, there is no need to even to go down to the rest of this hierarchy triangle. Obviously, starve the landfill. is where we're at together. But I would also like to point out that this triangle was created by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. There is a competing triangle out right now by the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, which actually puts waste to energy above composting. I just want to talk about that for a moment, because waste to energy is not renewable. You take this resource, you put it in a truck, you put it in an anaerobic digester for methane to power the truck to literally drive back to the city. Waste to energy is still very linear, but we as a resource recovery movement are definitely competing with anaerobic digesters and waste to energy right now. So the education that, again, if we're doing everything right, we probably wouldn't even need to get past number 4 for a zero waste economy. So don't be intimidated by this slide, because it's a ton of tiny words that you can't read right now. But I'm putting it up here because it is one of the resources available on compostlaw.org. And it's a 2-page handout that it helps you as a roadmap for folks that are not policy experts, but to understand where you are in the process and what would be affecting you in that process. So really quickly, you've got, and we're going to go over this in cartoons, but you've got about 4 stages that you need to, from the start of working with a material to when it becomes ready for distribution. So there's laws about generation, with people who are generating waste, what they have to do with it. Then there are laws about collection, people that are moving and transporting that material to make sure that it is diverted from the landfills. Then there are the composters themselves. These could be large-scale facilities. Obviously, we're concerned about small-scale community hubs. And then there's the new soil, the finished product. That is also regulated as well. And then that 4-step process is then broken down into these 2 columns. The first is protection. So like I said, there are laws in all of these areas that are set up to protect people and public health and safety. But half of these laws, especially the ones coming out right now, are about planning. So we all know SB 1383, it's probably a household legislation. And if you don't know it, just briefly, it's the law in California that is now requiring every jurisdiction to source, separate material, and divert organics from the landfill. We have a goal of 75% reduction by 2025. It's 2023, and the state of California is nowhere close to meeting that goal. So much, I want to quantify it for you. If we are going to have 75% diversion, the state of California needs to divert 26.8 million pounds of material per year from a landfill. And in order to do that, that would take 85 large-scale facilities that need to be sited and built. And that takes usually on average 6 to 10 years to site and build some of these facilities. So we're not only way behind the game, it's also going to cost $17.4 billion to create those facilities. And we would still not meet this deadline of 2025. So what's fantastic is the second side of this, the Compost Policy Advocacy Roadmap. So this is a way for laying the groundwork to show and to advocate the opportunities that we can get up and running within 1 to 2 years, that collectively we do fantastic amount of diversion. We're not an insignificant percentage anymore. If we were funded at the same level that, we'll go into the numbers in a second. We need a slide. We need a slide for that. So I'm going to keep you on the edge of your seats. So this slide, really quickly, this is the difference between protection and planning. So the states of California really are where we're at, is this seemingly competing goals. So we're going to go through those 4 steps of the process right now, and I have my trusty friend Carrot Top that is going to walk us through the process. So the first is about generators. Oh, I have to give credit where credit is due. These cartoons are created by Janelle Orsi. She is the executive director of the Sustainable Economies Law Center. She has excellent ones on everything from business development to community energy generation, solar. It's fantastic. You should, you should definitely watch some of her videos. But she helped us with this presentation to put it together to make policy very accessible to everyday people. So we don't lay it on too thick. But basically again here with generators, there are rules for protection about what type of bin you can put your material in, when you can put it out on your sidewalk, who can come pick it up, and all of that is very regulated normally as franchise agreements. So this is when you have one service provider that signs an exclusive contract with the municipality, and they become the only person that can pick up those mixed materials. Some counties and jurisdictions have done open contract bidding processes for who is going to service generators. But regardless of whether it is exclusive or it is a competitive bidding process, there's always the ability for an individual to self-haul their material. And sometimes there's only a few designated facilities that that individual can take it to. But where we're focused on is this planning side. Again, right? We're trying to build the future that we're most interested in. So we have really focused on the fact that we are not waste haulers. We are just removing the word waste from our vernacular completely. We are resource recovery. We are food runners, essentially, right? Like worms are still living creatures, and we're going and getting them food, and we're running it over to them. They placed a pizza order delivery, just like I did. They need their pizza crust, and they've been waiting all day for it. So really kind of pulling it down into this atmosphere that the material that we are not is not waste. I also went into a little bit of the legal precedents about who did define the term waste. This actually comes from a lawsuit in the state of California, Rancho Mirage. It was actually about recycling. It wasn't even about compost. But waste did get defined in this lawsuit. So I would love to share the definition to motivate you that you are very outside of the definition. So the definition of waste is when a generator has a material and they put it in a bin and they set it out for collection for it to be disposed of. They no longer want that material. But an individual who has a banana peel and puts it in a bin and puts it in their freezer and saves it there for a week and then goes shops at their farmer's market and brings their material down to the farmer's market and drops it off where they know that it's going to go to a community garden, or they take it right there to the community garden. They have never treated that material like waste. They have treated it like their personal property. They want to go get it renovated. And they want to turn it back into a product in the economic mainstream, which is compost, which people sell. It has never been waste. So we have been very effective when we go to the city councils and say, we just want to let you know that we would like to be considered part of those other services that are exempt from these hauling contracts. And people who are exempt from them are like 1-800-JUNK, right? That come and pick up your bulk furniture. What are some other services? I'm sure we could probably all think of a few of them. But in general, food runners are other services. All right. So that's the first one that you're going to run into. Who can come pick up your material? And where can you take it? And if it is regulated with a competitive contract bidding, you may not be able to put a bucket on someone's front stoop and come pick it up. It might be a drop-off or a U-Haul or self-hauling situation. Or you could have a city council that would be happy to write you a carve-out in their municipal code, which has happened. They might also open up a contract and bidding process to make it more favorable and friendly for small-scale businesses. So we have seen that as well, where you could actually participate and get a contract yourself. So once we create the material, we have somebody that obviously needs to come and pick it up. And that's what I've been alluding to this whole time. But there are permits for also where those folks can take it. So sometimes a farmer's market is actually seen as a transfer station because there's no composting that actually happens there, even though folks come and they drop it off there. But often transfer stations, at least the way they're defined in the law right now, or most municipal codes and zoning codes, is that they can only be zoned in industrial areas. Well, how many farmers markets do you know happen in the industrial area of your city? Probably in public parks, accessible areas downtown. And so viewing where you're actually collecting your material as not a transfer site is posing some challenges in some places, and others just see it as one other activity that happens at the farmer's market, and it's not, again, waste. It's a touch point for resource recovery work for those same farms sometimes. So finally, you've been able to collect your material and you want to get it to your site. Well, there are protection laws here which in the state of California are about facility permitting. So it's what type of material you can take, how big your facility can be, and where it actually can be sited as well. But the California Alliance for Community Composting originally started out as an unincorporated alliance of these 14 groups I met when I went to the Sustainable Economies Law Center that were all struggling with the law. And we went to Cal Recycle and we asked for an exemption. We said these permitting processes are for facilities at like 12,000 square feet, I mean bigger than any space we would possibly ever want, and for large amounts of throughput capacity. An average community composting site has about 20 cubic yards of material on it. There are up to 100 cubic yards and as low as 2 to 3 cubic yards. But I would say the average small scale hub is about 20 cubic yards. And so we educated them on what the material is that we are diverting at these sites, how much the throughput capacity is, and we came up with an exemption at scale. So this is the exemption that we were successfully able to get that allows community composting hubs not have to go through the facility permitting process. So that's if you keep your site below 750 square feet and 100 cubic yards of material on site at any one time. So the 100 cubic yards includes new material coming onto your site, any browns, wood chips, and bulking agents that you're storing at your site to mix into balanced compost recipes, the active composting piles, and the curing piles before distribution. Yes, Janelle?
And not or, right? 750 square feet and 100 cubic yards.
Correct. And I would say this is because zoning and planners work in 2 dimensions. They're actually not really good at 3 dimensions. But we are obviously working in volume more than we are working in square footage. So when a regulator comes on your site, active composting 750 square feet or less. That's enough for like 9 windrows. It's plenty of space. 100 cubic yards of material is the size of an Olympic swimming pool. I have never seen that at a community composting hut. So we have a lot of room to grow within this exemption. And pushing up against that limit too is where we would start to really engage the local enforcement agencies if you did think that you were going to go over that area. Zoning, however, just one second, zoning, however, is a little bit different than facility permitting because that lies with the jurisdictions. The facility permitting is a state agency, Cal Recycle, it's at the state level. But the municipalities and the jurisdictions are able to say where a facility can go. So this is where planning and your zoning and planning department comes in, and this is where you'll probably find the most ambiguities in the law. Just the term garden sometimes I haven't even found in some of these cities' zoning codes. And then also the local, regional air, water, and vector and fire regulations. So these are some other local enforcement agencies that very much care what you're doing at your site. So this is the Air and Resources Board, this is the Water Board, for both of those. With the Air and Resources Board, they're most concerned about volatile organic compounds. These are noxious gases. They come off of your compost piles and do pose somewhat of an issue at a large scale. For community composting hubs, VOCs are negligent. So we are working right now with the Bay Area Water Quality and BACMOD, I'm blanking on this acronym, about a protocol for the VOCs for community scale. Probably an exemption is what it's going to turn out to be, and not actually a specific protocol, because we're finding that they are so negligent. There's also the Water Board. So the Water Board gave a different volume exemption than Cal Recycle. So for the Water Board, they actually consider on-farm composting also a type of community composting. This is, however, very limited with the types of materials you can bring. So if you're zoned in an agricultural area, it's very rural, you're a farmer and you want to allow people to bring material to your site, and you're going to compost it there, create compost, and share it with all of the rest of your farmers in your community. Because of scale and also the zone, they do limit the type of materials, and fortunately, food waste is not one of those materials. But we know for a really great balanced recipe, you need a lot of nitrogen. So this is one area of improvement, and I would say collaboration between state agencies, we could get some consistency on. One says we can do it, the other says we can't. Also, the Water Board allows up to 500 cubic yards on a site before it would go into Water Board permitting. So the Water Board, and then one other thing about the Water Board is that your active piles have to be at least 250 feet from a water source. Water source is defined as not only a well or any sort of drinking, but also the runoff, where your leachate is going to go. So if it went into a storm drain or... so to really kind of focus before you lay down your area where you're going to be composting, just think about where are the water sources onto this site. And fire regulations. This is actually more of a partnership than it is more about the regulations. So as we know, there's a lot of carbon mass that is being cleared from our forests right now, and would make one excellent biochar to inoculate it and then turn it into activated charcoal and to add it to our compost piles. There are some programs coming out of CAL FIRE right now to do experimentation in areas where households have to clear the debris around their home and what to do with it. So feedstock recovery hub just for browns, just for trees, and just for any of the debris around, what is it called? Defensible space. That's what I'm trying to get out, the defensible space. Isaac, yeah.
Yeah, so in 2020, we were inspected by the LEA, and they told us that our original limitation that your site can only be so large, and they admitted that the loophole in this is that you can have as many sites as you want, and as long as no single site meets that requirement, you can basically infinitely expand. And I was just curious, like, when these exceptions went into place, because that information totally lines up with what I was told in 2020.
2019. 2019.
Okay, so that must have went into place just in time for us. The LA was very friendly with us, and they're like, yeah, just make more sites and you can have infinite loops.
Yeah.
They admitted that straight up.
So just to clarify the infinite loop, the infinite amount of sites, so it is by consecutive acre. So if you have a plot that is 50 acres, that's 750 square feet and 100 cubic yards, I think, per acre. So
So
I'm not really actually, I'm going to say in preface with, I'm not actually sure how that would work out on a 50-acre farm, but I can tell you from experience how it's working out in the city of Los Angeles. So LA Compost and Michael Martinez compost at Griffith Park, one of the biggest parks right behind Dodger Stadium. But they have several different sites at Griffith Park because there's a lot of roads that come in and out of it. There's highways, and the feed in from the few farmers markets come from all directions. So technically, they have one site, it's called Griffith Park, but they have broken it up into several hubs to manage the material in just manageable quantities for them, not even 100 cubic yards, but just what is reasonable when these teams show up. So we have been seeing this work out with the LEAs when they give us access to public parks. The resource conservation districts have also treated us in the same way, but most are very supportive, like you said, of giving public lands and to reutilizing space like this. The River Conservancies is another really great type of organization to go to, and they're also supported by the LEAs too. So I would say this is a fantastic opportunity for partnership and for clarification.
that loophole was in the context that our sites, one is here and one's on the other side of town. The sites are very far from each other in our context there.
Oh yeah. Well then they're definitely separate sites. I was thinking about more than one hub on a contiguous piece of land owned by the same person, like a resource conservation district or a public park or the city.
Thank you.
More, yeah. Oh no.
I also have some interesting comments about being an authorized hauler. We were able to lobby our city and get a carve out from Recology to become an authorized hauler through our city of Arcata. I don't know if I can go back. We probably have a lot of stuff to talk about, but.
No, that is actually very exciting news. We have seen this, County of San Diego has also been really supportive. They created a grandfathered in clause for recyclable collectors and considered organics under that. Not fully familiar with the actual contract that they gave them, but they allow them to come and bid or be authorized or to create partnerships under maybe an exclusive service provider. So we are seeing that not everybody says no. Most people are like, wow, you want to service that really hard apartment complex that can't use any of the green bins because they have no place to store them, and we can't get a truck back in that alley anyway. And we're like, yeah, we're on bicycles, so we want to come pick that up. It's just 1, 2, 3 people in a household, tiny little buckets, walk down hallways, pick them all up, put them on your bike, and you're out. There's not a hauler in the world that's going to say, you'll help us with compliance. And so, and in this, I would just say, make sure you don't get taken advantage of, right? So we don't want just to kind of, what's an analogy I could give? So the way food running has, with the food recovery programs, is really an opportunity for donation dumping. So when you require people to not be able to throw away edible food, there's a point when they donate it that before it gets to those people that it becomes inedible. And then it arrives to those people as inedible and they can't eat it, and now it becomes their waste problem. And yeah, so it's just to say that I think in those situations, those food runners are kind of getting taken advantage of, but not really solving the problem. And I'm cautious to say, let's partner with all of these monopolized corporations trying to maximize profits for shareholders. Just be cautious that you're not getting taken advantage of. If you find value in your work and you want to negotiate contracts that support the value of what you do, charge more, honestly, because we do more. We don't just pick up the material and drop it off in another place. We do the education, we do the growing, we do the feeding, we bring the food right back to the same people. Our service is more expensive because we do more. So just don't get taken advantage if we're getting into these partnerships. But it is exciting to know that there are haulers out there that are interested in working with us because we can do some of the things that they can't do. So they can do big and one size fits all. But again, small is beautiful. Go ahead.
Recology gave us 10% of our city as part of their franchise agreement. Normally they get exclusive rights to 100% of the organics collection. Do you think that is fair? They said, okay, anybody who's not us can there can be up to 10%. So like right now, it's just full cycle compost and the local worm guy. And so we are sharing that 10% cap together. Have you heard anybody else say, oh, we got to carve out from our local franchise agreement and what their percentage was?
I do not have an example of that, but I have a cautionary tale of how it could go in the other direction. So the jurisdiction of Santa Cruz also just, it's not a happy ending, spoiler alert. So we have a project, actually one of the founding organizations of California Alliance for Community Composting, Hardcore Compost, has been operating in Santa Cruz for over a decade now. And they started out on bicycles, but now they have 250 residential customers that truck in a fantastic site. And the city was going to promise them to share the transfer station where they were going to create their own composting facility as a place where hardcore compost could grow and they could accept more of the residential customers and operate alongside the service provider that they were going to sign a contract with. But they did not keep their word. In fact, they have made it very difficult for hardcore compost to continue operating on a price war, for starters, not offering them the ability to share that facility, or even a role in just managing it. Just give the job to hardcore compost and the city do the hauling. So all the promised partnerships, they just got cold feet, and there is no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes I find that these poor form from government agencies often can be left in one person, one single individual that's just not sold on the idea. And that's so limiting, and I don't really have a solution to get through that yet, except for love, right? Just bring them down and have them become a part of your community and show them what it is and affect them, and then they walk away and they feel that love, and it does change people's minds. So unless you can physically touch it and see it, and I'm really sorry that's happening in Santa Cruz, I wish I could, yeah.
I have updates that are kind of exciting.
Oh, good.
It seems like it was mostly just one person, the city manager department, kind of, I won't but we started working with the city council, and it seems to be looking up. It seems like they're now trying to take more load on it, trying to carve out space for us. So even if it really doesn't work out, but I just talk to the people in the city, talk to the people in position of power, make it work. It seems like the city council is pretty on our side, at least a couple of them, and I'm trying to get those promises in on that.
Yeah. That was in the microphone. Thank you for sharing.
It really helped us to get in on it early on.
Yeah.
Before they even started writing what they're going to do about SB 1383, we were bugging them like, hey, we want to be included, and that just really helps.
Yeah. So if anybody didn't hear that advice, it's start early, get in before a lot of these laws, and your service providers are going to start changing, and that's now.
Just to piggyback on that, our local task force for the 1383 compliance allows us to interact in their planning meetings as stakeholders. So they've been holding them virtually. I think now if you're a jurisdiction, you have to be there, but they're still televising them and on Zoom. So, if that's a possibility, if you have task force that are still, working out compliance, tell them you're a stakeholder and I don't know, politely demand to be part of that meeting, if possible.
Make it a challenge for them
Yeah.
to learn more.
And the planning then also, this kind of ties into this, is that not only are the new laws really coming down the pipeline right now, also so are a lot of grants and loans and technical assistance programs. Community composting for green spaces being one of them. We also have the Community Economic Resilience Fund by the Governor's Office of Planning and Research is another. There is national funding for this. The USDA has the Climate Smart Agriculture program, and also the Sustainable Cities Program, where you can partner with your city on climate action planning. This is what Michael was talking about during his talk on Friday when he showed you the map of mapping all of the open green spaces in the city of Los Angeles. That was a climate action planning they did with that grant money. So don't forget about the funding opportunities here. It's not just about contracts and bidding. Fatima, yes?
Yeah, I have a question. So when you say planning and zoning, but then also you're talking, because there's so many different layers to this. So like zoning administrators reside within typically a community development department of a city jurisdiction and or maybe county, might be called something different. So the zoning administrator in the planning at the city, local jurisdiction level is gonna be those policies around what's in the code.
Oh, this is a great question.
But,
Yeah.
so then now when you're talking about these contracts or whatever that conversation was, I'm assuming that that's with the department, whoever manages either is Public Works
Yeah.
or utility, or whoever
Yeah.
manages the solid waste for that jurisdiction. And I don't think they talk to each other, and then you just mentioned.
So, yeah, I'm just going to cut you off because I know where you're going with this and I want to give you a resource.
Yeah.
So the who, the where, the what, the when. If you go to compostlaw.org and you go to the tab Resources, there are all the agencies that you do need to speak with at any point you are in the process. But why I have broken this up into 4 different parts of the process is that, as Fatima was describing, it's a different agency depending on where you are in the process. So if you're composting and that's all you do and not collections, you're with zoning and planning departments trying to site facilities in your jurisdiction. But if you're trying to move and collect the material, then you are also with your municipal code. That's your city council. Those are your city representatives. Those are the people that basically decide what are the laws of the city and how are we going to move this around. After you've created the material, you're usually with an urban ag department or the California Department of Food and Agriculture. So for sale and distribution of finished compost, it is highly regulated by the CDFA. But if you're not selling it and you're just using it right on site, we test it for you just to make sure it's safe. Janelle taught you how to test it yourself. You should be testing it, but you can feel free to distribute that to your community and that you're not breaking any laws. I think the first step of that too is that a real good extra credit project for me would be a flow chart that's just yes or no questions. Are you composting? Yes, talk to this person. Are you or no? I'm just hauling, talk to this person, right? So a flow chart that helps a community composter go through who should I be speaking to and when. We do not have that resource yet, but I'm motivated to create it because I get those questions a lot. It is very confusing. From my experience, if you just start cold calling around, you'll get lots of different answers from different agencies, which makes it more confusing for you. But even if you knew the right agency to go to, sometimes it's that same issue. So again, as you become clear on what you're doing, just keep talking about what you're doing and then ask that agency, how does it apply to the work that you're doing and what do I need to know to stay in compliance? There is also a website on for CalRecycle for the local enforcement agencies in your jurisdiction. It's usually the Department of Environmental Health for talking about siting facilities or to come down to do sites and inspections. That's only required if you request to be on any level of a facility above excluded activities. And we don't have any sites that are any level above excluded activities. Yes, Janelle?
I just wanted to add to that with the LEAs. One of the most helpful things that I think I accomplished by speaking with our local LEA, which again, we are also very blessed with a very sweet woman in that position. But she agreed that if there are any complaints from any of our community composting sites, that she will come and speak to us first before she gets code enforcement involved. So it's a really simple thing that they can grant you that is actually extremely helpful and gives you a chance to fix an issue
Yeah.
before it becomes a big problem.
Yeah. And I'll send out the link of where you go to find out who your LEA is, but I'll preface that with, you're going to get to the Department of Environmental Health for your county, and then you're going to see like 5 or 6 names listed. We don't have a designated person yet, and it is really hard to find out who is that one of those 5 to 6 people. Yes, Vincent?
I think I missed, what's LEA stand for?
Thank you. Local Enforcement Agent or Agency. Yeah, this is an acronym soup. So finding the right person from that list of the drop-down is really just kind of cold calling. But I also want to preface this with, if you don't need to go to the notification tier, don't. This is a whole bunch of reporting and paperwork that you would have to do in addition to community composting for green spaces to your city. And it's different reporting than what we're asking you to do. And we're not going to help you with it because we don't have the own bandwidth on our team to help you do reporting for notifications for the cities. So it's not a discouragement. It's to say that notification is work. It's more work for you. And it is needed if you are going to get up to a certain threshold of size. But if you're a 3-bin system at a community garden, it is usually an accessory use of community gardening. And community gardens are often sited and zoned to be there. And people can bring down material, like food material, and drop it at that site. So as long as that community garden is not distributing the finished compost, that they're using it on site, or I'm sorry, selling it. They can use it on site or they can give it back to the same people that made it. But I would say for those folks that are large enough that they're creating excess supply, so that's more compost that could possibly be used on your site or by your community, and giving it away to the public, the notification tier is probably more geared towards those folks. And the reason that I say that is because one of the other new sections of the law, while I'm here on this new soil slide, is procurement. So part of SB 1383 is that cities have to procure and apply the compost that they're now creating. And we're saying we're producers, right? So we've gotten a lot of support financially to buy the equipment, launch sites, and pay site operators for a very minimal amount per week, just to keep it open to the public so they can use the site and we can educate people about compost. But we know we are dedicating much more than that limited amount of time to these sites. So one opportunity for generating finance out of the compost we create is working with your city for procurement. We have not effectively figured out a way how to monetize that yet, how to get credits for that, how that is going to work. But what we do know is if we are going to be credited in procurement, we do need to be on the notification tier. There's no point in getting to the notification tier if you literally do not have excess supply to give away. However, we're saying, why do we need to give it away and have excess supply in order to participate in procurement? Isn't just using it on site and creating it locally enough to qualify for procurement? And this is a real gray area of the law right now. So this might be the first thing I would do in my soil policy parties to hack it out, to get a group of people together, buy us pizza, and say, hey, I really want to know what are the cost-benefit analysis of asking my local enforcement agent to be listed on the notification tier. And also, what are some possible ways that we could generate wealth by participating in procurement for the projects that we're doing? And this is something we haven't fully actually explored yet. So it's happening now. Again, like I said about compost laws, it's all happening now. We do have an incredible resource in the room, Cal Recycle, who has put together at least a minimal contact list right now of some folks in some counties identified in the local enforcement agency as the person best to speak to. But we're still kind of all developing that section right now. And in no jurisdiction have we been successful about qualifying for procurement. So this is an area of growth. I hope that the next time I speak to you that we'll have it worked out a little bit better. So just keep an open mind about that. I wouldn't unduly go to your local enforcement agent unless you have to, because paperwork. All right, so you've created this amazing compost. Yes.
Sorry, one more question. So when you're saying procurement opportunities or even credit in it, are you suggesting that then there would be an opportunity to be able to sell what you're producing back to the city or the county or the jurisdiction that you're in? Is that what you were saying?
Well, yes, but for credit, not for sale. So basically, they need to apply compost to the ground buy it from, they send the material out of the cities, and then that gets made into compost. They're required now to procure compost and put it on the ground. We're saying we've created the compost and it's still here, and we put it on the ground in the same place where we created it. Can we help you qualify for procurement? And so obviously that helps them. I think the answer for them would be yes. Our challenge is to say, okay, well, in every other situation, you're buying it back. You're physically paying money. So even though we're not giving you it, we're just putting it in the ground right here. Can we still get the physical money and the procurement credit? So, but does that qualify as a sale? And then does that mean that now we need to get CDFA involved? Do we need to have all of our compost tested? Do we need a labeling claims? I mean, it could be the rabbit hole. So I would say this is an area we're not quite sure how we're going to proceed yet at all. Janelle.
I was curious from a conversation I had yesterday, it was suggested that if we did qualify for the notification tier, it would be just for green waste composting, so we would no longer be able to use food scraps.
That is correct. That's correct.
So is it just that the notification tier that considers food waste as a resource is one that's unattainable for us due to cost or description or?
I think the cost is different in every county. I know that it's, just to give you a sense, it's $580 for notification tier inspection just to get an LEA to come out to a site. So just know that if you're asking someone to come out and do an inspection, they're going to give you a bill at the end, and it's not cheap. So it's also not free. And the second part of that is, yes, if you're asking to be on the notification tier, but you're not a fully permitted facility, and then therefore you've just given up your ability to be in the excluded activities, the result of that is that you probably will not be able to accept food material anymore. It'll just be agricultural material. So we don't quite know whether this is a benefit or a boon, and I'm willing to figure it out with this group. So this is it's a very new section of the law. And it's coming down the pipeline right now. Even a lot of the larger facilities and compost providers haven't fully figured out how to make it work. The cities are very concerned about procurement of are we producing enough compost even for those cities to meet their procurement targets. That's part of the discussion as well. So happening right now, why I don't have all of the answers. All right, so you've created this beautiful compost and you want to make money off of it. Or you don't. You want to just put it in the ground right there where you made it. So the protection part of this, like I was saying, is the laws required for testing and labeling. That is the CDFA. How they do it is they charge you a millage fee. Millage fees are based on the ton of production. So if you're producing 1 ton or more, you have a set millage rate. And also inspections frequency based on your production per year. But there's a really big gray area in CDFA's law that says anything over 1 ton of production a year. So I called and asked, what about under 1 ton of production per year? And then that section miraculously disappeared in their legislation. So now it actually says 0 to 1 ton. Has its own millage fee. So I just caution advice sometimes of calling these agencies when maybe you get a result that may not actually benefit your future. So think about it before you do it, hack it out, work with your friends, test the conversation, come with a united, educated front. Like blind cold calling may not always be the most helpful thing for you. Ahmad?
Have you heard or seen anything in terms of residential sites, because you have probably the only one, so we can be looking at residents, urban residents.
So you're thinking more like home composting? Yeah, always exempt. And especially if you're using your compost on site
Even as a compost.
and or distributing it for free, it's outside of a lot of this, a lot of the sale of compost legislation. Another nuanced portion of the CDFA's laws is that if you're getting rid of the material in bulk, which is 100 pounds or more, it's in a bag and it does not have anything written on that bag, not even best compost in the whole entire world. You can't call it anything, because the moment you do, that's a label, you're making a claim, and you do need to now get it tested to say, this is compost. But they also say, this is your nutrient analysis, and this is your heavy metals levels, and so you have to publish all that stuff on the back of your label of your bag. So it's really best to, what our situation I see is you haul. So we have a big pile, you come with your own bucket, and you go away with free compost. Or it's a charge per 5-gallon bucket as a suggested donation, instead of like a price. Is the best way to do it. So you saw how Ron was doing it at the IRC, just a big thing at the end of the driveway, free compost, people come and they can get it. So that's a safety zone. Isaac.
We haven't gone through CDFA labeling yet, but as a solution to that, we found that we can legally sell compost as long as we sell at least 4 cubic yards at a time. Apparently, if it's under that amount, it's there's some laws against it, but we find that we have our website, and people scroll down, and they can go order compost, and we don't make any claims about it. We just say, we make compost, and you can buy a minimum of 4 cubic yards, and we haven't had any trouble with that. So it's our very kind of low-key way of doing it. Sadly, we can't get into garden stores because we don't have CDFA labeling, but you know, it's a good way to kind of get started in a niche market.
Great advice. And there are a lot of grants, loans, and technical assistance programs coming out right now to start small businesses. So this is a phenomenal opportunity to say my small business is that I make and sell compost. How I did it when I first started out is I would go down to First Fridays in Oakland, and I brought a bucket of my worm castings, and I wrote just the word poop on it. And I sat on the bucket. And everybody was like, is that girl pooping into the bucket? What is in the bucket? And then I'd be like, it's worm poop. And then I'd have them feel it, touch it, whatever. And then they'd take their scoop, they'd put it in their own coffee bag, and then they walked away with poop. And that's what I called it. So, yeah, it's a tough one. A good sense of humor goes a long way.
If you use the compost, like we have control over some front yards to some apartments, if you use that as part of a social enterprise, then your compost that you use doesn't have to go through all these other, does it?
It's true. Keep it simple.
Just use it in the
Keep it easy on
neighborhood
yourself.
and get paid to do whatever you're doing, but not for the compost.
Like job creation. This is
Yeah.
very fundable in your community. Jobs in low-income and disadvantaged communities, for sure. And that speaks to politicians, jobs. All politicians, regardless of what side you are. So, obviously we know the spectrum of composting is a beautiful soil web, and I would think that backyard composting, like Ahmad said, is very well understood by policymakers. Large-scale composting, also very well understood. But all these other innovative things that we're doing, like neighborhood level or worker cooperatives like Hardcore Compost, I mean, really trailblazing. This is an opportunity to go in and say, we would like all unified schools in this district to have a composting hub where the kids can bring the material from home on, say, Wednesdays, which is garden class day, and they build and make and maintain compost piles together. And go talk to your zoner about that, your zoning and planning department about that, and say, is this possible? Can we make this possible? How would it be? How would you define it? And then we also mapped what community composting looks like to educate our policymakers. So these are all the different places that the material is collected, how it is transported, where it goes, what's the methodology, and where does that material end up in the end. And as you can see, it's really beautiful. But as you can see here, this is our pain point in every single place that we work. So this is an opportunity to get, again, educate yourselves and become a unified front before you go in and speak to your city council about transferring things. Ahmad, yes.
Can we get slide decks? I'm taking a lot of pictures.
I will share my slide deck, yeah. I mean, in true honesty, I've done this presentation from 2017 to 2019, maybe 100 times. I have not done this since 2019 because we've trailblazed and gotten a lot of exemptions in these areas. But as you're going out, pardon? Yeah, I'm doing it for you guys because, because I think that as you embark, I want you to feel that you have a good sense of what your roadmap looks like. I'm not going to have all of the answers for you. I'm also not a lawyer, so I should have said that at the beginning. I'm a composter and a farmer just like you. So I just do homework. I just do my homework. All right, so one thing I have learned, though, about showing up at government is that there are usually very small policy windows. They come and they go very quickly, and you have to seize them because legislators are just moved on to the next problem, and stuff quite quickly. So a policy window is when there is a general awareness of what the problem is, that there are viable solutions to that problem that are interesting to policymakers, and there's a welcoming political mood when you show up. People are like, we've been waiting for you to solve this problem for us, like we have in Butte County, that is like, oh wow, someone's thinking about procurement because everybody else is so focused on diversion. So that's a policy window, and more importantly, those policy windows are popping up right now, if I haven't said that a million times during this speech. So there are several approaches when you go of things that you can ask for. We usually like to clarify definitions. We find that's a really good part. The other definitions that are in zoning and coding were written by people no smarter than you. They're written by normal people. So if you have a good definition that you've hacked out on your team, by all means, take it to the people that need to enact that and put it there. Create subcategories for yourself, create exemptions for yourself, ask for exactly what you need. It's very empowering. The next section is tiers of regulations. This is a way that we did with the permitting, for example. We saw that it was tiered based on size, type of material, and then we figured out where we fell on that tier, which was way below it. So we just asked, can you create a new tier? My favorite is the rights-based approach. So I think that access to clean air, clean water, and clean soil is a human right. And believe it or not, human rights-based approaches do speak to politicians. When you go and you say how people are being poisoned by the soil with the trucks of diesel and lead that have contaminated where these folks live, and you describe the injustices and the oppression that is happening with continuation of the status quo. And then incentives. This is the carrot approach with policymakers. So this is when you have enough government grants or supports coming out from these local agencies, get them, get these incentive programs, and then do your vision and your idea with them, right? Because if you're not showing up to those spaces and taking up space or applying and getting access to those resources, someone else is. Someone else is going to get those resources, and something else is going to come from that. And not always. but in general, probably not as virtuous as you all. So it's just a great opportunity that you do not want to slip by. Example of what a policy window looks like after you have your approach is rulemaking proceedings. So this is how SB 1383 got written. These are how we have air and water quality laws, the municipal bid seeking process we went over. There is legislation. So the legislation is actually a website called, man, I'm blanking right now, but it is every bill that gets introduced in the state of California, and you can search it by keyword. And this is just a daily thing I like to do on Monday mornings, because I'm a nerd, is go to the site and just do a quick search for compost. New bills are introduced like frequently, and they also, bills that don't pass or get to go to a vote on the House floor can get taken over. Basically, the number will stay the same, but the content under it can be completely rewritten by a new sponsor. So sometimes we see a number of a bill introduced in, say, February for the first part of the session, but by September it looks completely different and actually talks about compost in it. And we're like, how did we miss the process of the introduction of these? And that's because they take old numbers and just rewrite the body of them so they don't have to get it to the floor again. So it's a trick, but it happens, and you just do need to keep searching for the keywords. And then also drafting your own bills. So some of the bills that you do see come through are written, again, by everyday people. But a legislator is the only one that can introduce them. So you're going to need to find an author. This is what's called an author of the bill. So when a bill has a number and it also has a name of a senator that introduced it, this is when you need to have a real good senator, particularly one where you're the constituent is when I find it most effective, who can author, you write it, the bill, but they will author and sponsor it to get to a vote on the floor. Dawn.
The assembly too.
And the assembly as well, correct. And then, I don't know, become a legislator. I'm not a recovering politician, but I can only imagine what that feels like.
One more thing, so don't forget, you have your ordinances, which are city ordinances, which are easily changed. You have, this your city council, then you go on assembly and everybody else. There's sometimes changing this ordinance of the city.
Fantastic, yes, that as well. The slides that I skipped were 1383. I think we've all covered that. I already talked about air and water quality rules, but these are basically the ones that I said out loud. This is the slide on it, so in case you weren't taking notes. These are the zoning ordinances. And what I like to call self-assessment BMPs. So building confidence with your local enforcement agencies. So they want to know, how are you monitoring your sites? Do you have a list of how everybody's doing this? So creating consistency within the minimum standards all of us need to meet. That way, a local enforcement agency comes to a site and they have minimum expectations. We can create those BMPs. It doesn't have to be a scientist who tells us what to do. We can tell them what we do and why it is meeting public health and safety standards. So creating your own list of BMPs, we have one. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance has one. Some of the compost hubs that went through CCG1 created their own. But share that. It builds confidence. And then lastly is organize your own soil policy teams. The curriculum is already written. It is on compostlaw.org. You can download it and it's meant for 12 sessions. And they're meant to be dinner parties. And it takes 2 hours to run a class. So the first hour you go hack a section of the law, then you eat dinner. The second half of the hour, you actually do a fun activity. That is public advocacy. And in the curriculum, there are several really fun examples. So I encourage you to look at it. And then it's most important anytime you get a success to celebrate and share your successes, because it's knowledge sharing for how other people can copy you and how to do it in their jurisdiction. So if you get something changed or you get an exemption, we want to hear about it because these are the questions that are all coming out of here. Someone saying, how do you do this? How do you do that? What's happening in your city? And the more successes that we get, and it helps us just learn how to do this well. So yeah, and if you're not successful, celebrate the failures as well. And I think that's important because there's always something to learn on how you can do it better, and we want to know about that too. Okay, so I think that most of this, what issues are coming up with you, we've kind of talked about some approaches that we should be exploring, resources that are helpful and available to you, new ones that I want to create during this round. But most importantly, do you have any favorite laws? Do you have any favorite policies, positive examples? And if you know about them, make sure that you emphasize those when you go to your legislators. Thank you.